Sutta Goswami said, "Aho, how, Vayam, we, Janma Bhrta, promoted in birth, Adya, today, ha, certainly, Asma, have become Avriddha Anuvritya, by serving those who are advanced in knowledge. Api, although Viloma Jata, born in a mixed caste. Daushkulyam, disqualification of birth. Adim, suffering. Vidunoti, purifies. Shigram, very soon. Mahat Tanmanam, of those who are great. Abhidana, conversation. Yoga, connection. Translation, Sri Sutta Goswami said, "O God, although we are born in a mixed caste, we are still promoted in birthright simply by serving and following the great who were advanced in knowledge. Even by conversing with such great souls, one can without delay cleanse oneself of all disqualifications resulting from lower births." Purport: Sutta Goswami did not take his birth in a Brahmana family. He was born in the family of a mixed caste or an uncultured low family. But because of higher association, like Sukadeva Goswami and the great rishis of Naimisharanya, certainly the disqualification of inferior birth was washed off. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followed this principle in pursuance of the Vedic usages, and by his transcendental association he elevated many low-born, or those disqualified by birth or action, to the status of devotional service, and established them in the position of acharyas, or authorities. He certainly stated that any man, whatever he may be, whether a Brahmana or Sudra by birth, or a householder or a mendicant in the order of society, if he is conversant with the science of Krishna, he can be accepted as an acharya or guru, a spiritual master. Sutta Goswami learned the science of Krishna from great rishis and authorities like Shukadev and Vyasadeva, and he was so qualified that even the sages of Naimisharanya eagerly wanted to hear from him the science of Krishna in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he had the double association of great souls by hearing and preaching. Transcendental science, or the science of Krishna, has to be learned from the authorities, and when one preaches the science, he becomes still more qualified. So, Sutta Goswami had both the advantages, and thus undoubtedly he was completely free from all disqualifications of low birth and mental agonies. This verse definitely proves that Srila Sukadeva Goswami did not refuse to teach Sutta Goswami about the transcendental science, nor did the sages of Naimisharanya refuse to hear lessons from him because of his inferior birth. This means that thousands of years ago there was no bar to learning or preaching the transcendental science because of inferior birth. The rigidity of the so-called caste system in Hindu society became prominent with only 100 years or so, when the number of Dvija Bandhus, or disqualified men in the families of higher castes, increased. Lord Sri Chaitanya revived the original Vedic system, and he elevated Thakur Haridas to the position of Namacharya, or the authority in preaching the glories of the holy name of the Lord, although His Holiness Srila Haridas Thakur was pleased to appear in a family of Mohammedans. Such is the power of pure devotees of the Lord. The Ganges water is accepted as pure, and one can become purified after taking a bath in the waters of the Ganges. But as far as the great devotees of the Lord are concerned, they can purify a degraded soul even by being seen by lowborn, and what to speak of association. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to purify the whole atmosphere of the polluted earth by sending qualified preachers all over the world, and it remains with the Indians who take up this task scientifically and thus do the best kind of humanitarian work. The mental diseases of the present generation are more acute than bodily diseases. It is quite fit and proper to take up the preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world without delay. Mahatmanam Abhidhana also means a dictionary of great devotees, or a book full of the words of great devotees. Such a dictionary of the words of great devotees and those of the Lord are in the Vedas and allied literatures, specifically the Srimad Bhagavatam. Translation: Sri Sutta Goswami said, "O God, although we are born in a mixed caste, we are still promoted in birthright simply by serving and following the great who are advanced in knowledge. Even by conversing with such great souls, one can without delay cleanse oneself of all disqualifications resulting from lower births." So here we have a verse talking about caste or birth. Here Sutta Goswami says he is a Viloma Jata. So there are two types of mixed castes. Those where the man marries into a lower caste, and that where he marries into an upper caste with an upper caste woman. So if the man marries a woman of a lower caste, that is more permissible, and if the man marries an upper caste woman, that is considered less desirable. That's the Viloma type. In any case, there's some sort of contamination due to the mixing of castes. So that was quite prominent, and we'll see it mentioned often in other literatures like the Smriti Shastras, like Bhanu Smriti, and we find several references to that also in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the mixed caste, as we see, because you marry someone of another family who was of a lower caste, it was often dependent upon the family line, and it was simply named the whole family of a certain caste by hereditary means. So if you're born in a Sudra family, you're a Sudra, and when you get married and have children, then you're a Sudra. Or if you're a Brahmana and you have children, the children become Brahmanas. They grow up, they have children. Their offspring are Brahmanas. So that was the common system that was in place, which is based on birth. We see, of course, in Bhagavad Gita, our acharyas and Srila Prabhupada point out that birth is not the only qualification. We have janma and karma as well, which the karma is there, or guna and karma as well. So qualities and actions are also important in determining what varna you belong to. Right? But the birth has become more prominent, and as Prabhupada mentions, it created a problem a few hundred years ago only, when it became overemphasized, the birth, and rather than the actual qualification of the person. So the qualification by birth had some, we could say, logic behind it, because we know that genetically there is characteristics passed on from parents to children, and in a general way, of course, but we have exceptional cases as well. So therefore we can predict that the parents who are sattvic will have sattvic children. So Brahmana parents will have Brahminical children in general. Or people in the mode of passion like Kshatriyas, then they will have Kshatriya children. And consequently, they will take up the same jobs. So the Kshatriya will take up administrative or military work, and the Brahmins will take up study of the Vedas and teaching. So there is some sense in the family lines, and we see that the whole of the king dynasties here, the Manu's dynasty, is based on family. The whole ruler of the earth, the line of kings, is based upon family lines. So the present line is traced back to Vaivasatta Manu. And then he had children, and they had children. And then this line comes down until we get to the Pandavas and the Kauravas and Krishna's dynasty. They all belong to that same lineage by family line. So it is quite strong. The only point is, it can't become too strong or too exclusive. And when it does, then some problems and discontent arise. So therefore we have these other considerations of guna and karma. We have to look at your qualities, and according to your qualities then you do activities. And if we see the activities and the qualities don't match the varna, there's something wrong, and then we can't classify you as that. If you do the work but you don't actually have the proper qualities or the proper activities, then you will fail. So if you're Brahmin by birth, but you do not have qualities of tolerance, sense control, etc., and faith in the scriptures, if you don't have those qualities, how you can call yourself a Brahmana? You're supposed to be studying the scriptures and teaching the scriptures, but you won't be able to do that if you don't have the proper qualification, and you can't do those activities. Why you should call yourself a Brahmana? And then if you're like that, and then you're unqualified, and then you marry, and then your children again go on, they may also be similarly disqualified. Once we get an unqualified person acting as a Brahmana, then his descendants may be also the same category. Again, unqualified. So in that way, say extreme emphasis upon the birth as the determination of your occupation and your varna doesn't always work. So we do have to consider these other factors. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, he also elaborates on this somewhat, because particularly the Gaudiya Vaishnavas get a little criticized by the traditionalists, whom we call the Smartas, who are very attached to the identity of Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, those designations. So they often will criticize the Vaishnavas as upsetting the whole system. Because as we see here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he elevated Haridas Thakur, who wasn't even in the Varnashram system at all. He was a Mohammedan, and he called him Acharya. He made him Acharya. So he gave great respect to him, more than even a Brahmana. So by we can say the disregard of the birthright, Varna by birthright, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu agitated some people in society, some Brahmanas. We see how the Brahmanas were agitated against Haridas Thakur. They complained to the Muslims, and they had him captured and beaten even. So this idea of going beyond the regular rule of birth is disturbing for some traditionalists. But nevertheless, we see it is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. There's a guna and karma as well as janma. And even before Lord Chaitanya, we'll see that there are exceptional cases also of people that were great devotees, and they were respected beyond their varna. And we'll see that, for instance, I think it's the sons of Bharat, he came in Kshatriya line, some became Kshatriyas, and some became sages, Brahminical, his offspring. So, therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that the Gaudiya Vaishnava does not disrespect the traditional concept of, Brahmana, etc. And they're willing to even honor a Brahmana, even if he's not so qualified. And we see that's the case of Krishna also. He will honor people of Brahman or whatever, even if they make mistakes or whatever. So the Vaishnava also doesn't want to destroy that system. But at the same time, there has to be some flexibility to give respect where it is due. So even if the person doesn't belong to the Varnashram system, he's lower than a Sudra. If, in terms of qualities, he is superior to everybody else, including the brahmanas, then we are obliged to give him the highest respect. Yeah? So this is particularly true in the case of bhakti. We can respect the brahmana because he is fixed in sattva. That's his, due to sattva, one is qualified as a brahmana. That's one's quality. If you have the guna of sattva, then you should be fixed as a brahmana. Now, and some of the people who are born in brahmana families may come up to that standard. Fine, and we respect. And even Krishna respects the brahmanas. But at the same time, higher than that is the devotee. So we give more respect to the devotee. And the strange thing is that the devotee, the elevation to the status of a devotee does not depend on varna at all, does not depend on that birth at all, as we see in the case of Haridas Thakur. So one can become the most elevated devotee even though born in the lowest family. That is possible. So bhakti goes beyond this whole idea of gunas and varnas, etc. As we understand, the bhakti depends on mercy. And if the mercy comes to a person who's outside the varnashram system, fine, then he is more elevated than anyone in the varnashram system, and therefore he gets more respect. So that is the consciousness of a person following Lord Chaitanya. We give respect to the consciousness, the higher consciousness, the person who is a devotee of the Lord. And even there, we will give different types of respect. So in Nectar of Instruction, the Rupa Goswami says, we will respect a person who is at least got some aspects of being a Vaishnava, and he respects the Lord to some degree, or maybe he chants the name of the Lord once or twice or whatever, and he's not an offender. So we can give mental respect. Someone who's seriously following and maybe take initiation, etc., following principles, and understands bhakti in a proper way, practicing pure bhakti, then we give him greater respect. And we can offer our respects to him physically with namaskars, etc. And then another devotee who is very advanced and very attached to the chanting of the holy name, absorbed in serving Krishna at all times, then not only respect him, but we serve him with great devotion. So according to the status even within bhakti, then we have a little bit of distinction, and we give respect and more respect and most respect. And again, outside, we respect everybody because all living entities are Krishna Das, so we respect all living entities. As Lord Chaitanya says in Shishastaka, give respect to everyone. But then if there's a social system, we give respect to the Brahmana more than the others. But then more than that, we give respect to the Vaishnava, no matter what his Varna is, because he is higher in terms of consciousness. He's going beyond the gunas completely. So that is the understanding of the devotees of the Lord. And there's ample proof of this in the Bhagavatam and other scriptures, that the devotee is the most worshipable. And we have many statements to show that the Lord is not attracted to other processes, that is dharma and varnashram and jnana yoga and astanga yoga, but he is very attracted to bhakti. So therefore, anyone who has bhakti, that is the devotee, then the Lord is very attracted to that person. So the Lord also makes distinctions. Nice to follow Varnashram system because the Lord has set up that system, and in that system, the Lord himself favors the Brahmanas. He worships the Brahmanas also. But at the same time, more than that, the Lord is under the control of the devotees. He is completely controlled by whatever the devotee does. So the Lord himself favors the devotee, puts him in the highest place. So similarly, the devotees themselves carry out that same principle, and we give respect most to the devotees, which is beyond caste. So as far as the people within the caste system, or the Varnas, as I said, normally, yes, according to hereditary factors, then one will have certain qualities. Of course, we also get extraordinary cases where things come out completely opposite. Or, due to strange factors, as in the case of King Vena, he came from Kshatriya family in the line from Swayambhuva Manu, but he turned out to be the worst demon because the mother was wrong. There was something wrong with his mother. So sometimes we get strange results. And similarly, we get demons. In demon families, we have Hranikasipu. But then, what happened? He had the greatest son, Prahlad. And then later on, we get Bali again, great devotee of the Lord. So they're born in a demoniac family. Tamas and Rajas mixture, but yet we get great devotees coming out. So we can't always predict that hereditary factors and family lines are going to determine your qualification. So we'll have exceptional cases. So added to that mix is the fact that not only do we have the basic qualification of a person, let's say their genetic factors when they're born, but then we have the influences after they're born. So of course in the Varnashram society, generally the Brahmins were raised by Brahmins, so therefore the influence is Brahminical, and the Kshatriya is raised by Kshatriya, so the influence is Kshatriya. But in modern world, we see it's not like that at all. Everybody has all sorts of influences. So the environmental factors and how you're raised has a very big influence on the end result when you're growing up, what you become. Whatever your capacity is by genetics may be altered extremely by your upbringing. So therefore, how you're raised, how you're educated, these are great factors also which determine the end result. So it's not just your birth, but how you're molded between the birth and when you're 17 or 20 years old. All that span in which you grow up, that has a great influence on you. Of course, a lot of that is family influence. So if you come from a peaceful family and you're raised in a peaceful family, the child will come out and maximize whatever good qualities he has. On the other hand, if he's raised in he has good qualities, but he's raised in a very disturbed family, then those good qualities won't manifest, and he may have the opposite qualities coming out because of the way he's raised. So that has a big influence. So we can say parental influence is great. Education is another factor of what you learn with your teachers. And then, of course, another is general association. So if you associate with criminals, you're likely to become a criminal. If you associate with very sattvic people, you're likely to get influenced by that, even if your quality is tamasic. If you're surrounded by sattvic people, you tend to develop some sattva also. So the people you associate with are going to influence you a lot. So as children, then if you associate properly, then you can maximize whatever you're born with, your genetic qualities or whatever. You can maximize those if you associate with the proper type of people. If you associate with other people, you will degrade, and those qualities won't manifest at all. So therefore, determining the person when they're an adult, what they are is a complex mixture of many things. It's not just the birth or the genetic qualities or whatever, which also are subject to some mutation or whatever, but also with the total upbringing and the environment and the parents and whatever. That also has a huge influence to determine what you are when you grow up. So therefore, just basing on birth is very, very dubious, you can say, at best. So here we have the case of Suta Goswami, and he says he was a Viloma and born in mixed caste, a lower man marrying a higher woman, a woman of a higher caste, so not considered so good. But yet we see that Suta Goswami was selected to speak the Bhagavatam. So here's an example, just like Lord Chaitanya did this quite explicitly, again disturbed a lot of people, but we see in ancient times also, honor was given to persons, even if they were from a lower birth position, because of his knowledge, he was respected greatly and put in a high position as being the teacher of everyone else, all the sages who were there. He explains here how it happened. By serving and following the great who were advanced in knowledge. Vriddha anuvritya. Anuvritya means to serve, by serving. And vriddha means old. But of course it doesn't mean just old in age, but wise persons. Persons who have good knowledge. So he served very wise persons, and therefore he became qualified to speak, in spite of his low birth or whatever. Of course, we can. Even though he was born viloma jata, low birth or whatever, it does not mean that he had all low qualities either. But technically, if we were going to take birth, some people may take birth and they say, "Oh, you're not qualified to speak" or whatever. But he may have had some qualification. But especially by the association of great qualified persons who had knowledge, scriptural knowledge, then he developed knowledge, which means that by the association of devotees, then a person can change. He may have low qualities, he may have low birth or whatever, but by association, then he can elevate himself. So the association of devotees, therefore, is very, very important. We see in the case of Prahlad, how he was born in a Asuric family, but then he became a great devotee. How? Association with Narada Muni. When he was in the womb, he heard. He got to hear the Narada Muni teaching his mother. So by that association, he became a great devotee, in spite of the fact of bad family, hereditary things, father, crazy father who was trying to kill him all the time. He became completely different from his father. Because of the association of devotees. So, in this way, the association of devotees is one factor which can change all of these other things. So, even if a person is born in a bad family, even if he is raised in bad surroundings, doesn't have the proper education, even he's grown up and he's got all bad qualities, still, possibility is there of change by association. And then we have extraordinary cases. It may not even require association, but we get cases like Ajamil. He was born in a good family, but by association, he became bad. He became a criminal, hopeless criminal, until the end of his life. But then, he chanted the name of the Lord accidentally by naming his son Narayana, and he transformed. It didn't look like he transformed until he died, but when the Yamadutas came to get him, then he heard the conversation between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, and then he changed suddenly. And then he got back to life, and he became a devotee of the Lord. He became very pure, and eventually he went to Vaikuntha. So again, by the holy name and association of devotees, even though he was completely hopeless, he became opposite, completely purified. So we can never underestimate the power of hearing the name, the power of association of devotees, the power of hearing scriptural discourses from devotees. A very, very powerful influence. So in that sense, the birth is taken as a secondary thing. In other countries, not in India, other countries, this does not matter so much in one sense, because there is no castes in other countries of the world. They don't have that concept, at least explicitly. Many countries, of course, have traditions where they have royal families and whatever, and so they do have some class rules, like in England, they do have some idea about classes, of people, but it's a little more flexible. They're not, say, classified in such a rigid way as they have been in India. But in any case, whether it's inside India or outside India, the process of bhakti takes one beyond all of these other influences. And that's what makes it a universal process for everyone. Okay, any question?
Guna karma and association of devotees is more important. Why is it that Arjuna gave so much importance of both three.
Oh.
What did he mention that as his main argument, if guna, karma, and association of the devotees is more powerful
Yeah.
to influence the characters of beings, why is it that you push the argument to Krishna? You're going to be careful about the breed, basically. The breeding.
Oh, the chapter 1.
Yeah.
Mixed castes and all of this, yeah. We kill the husbands and then the women are left and they get mixed up and they marry into mixed castes and that will make Varna Sankara and then this will result in degradation. Yeah.
These Varna Sankara even by the courts stated as a very good argument.
Yeah.
But now you're saying that guna, karma, and association of devotees is much more powerful.
Yeah.
Should be at least taken into consideration.
Yeah. So, as I said, these are taken into consideration. It doesn't mean that birth is rejected. Yeah? So, in the normal varnashram system, they tend, in other ages particularly, they would emphasize more the birth and less the other things. Yeah? I think it's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that in Kali Yuga, we cannot take the birth as the main item at all. It's much, much secondary, and then we have to look at the gunas and the karmas instead. All that instead. So, and you judge the person when they're like 18 years old to see his qualities. Then we can see what Varna he belongs to. So it's a little bit of a change as we go from yuga to yuga. In previous yugas, you could more or less determine things by the birth, but there was flexibility there also. But in the present times, much, much less important the birth completely, and more important the other things. So the change in emphasis as time goes on. The other point, of course, is that in terms of pastimes, Arjuna is acting as a kshatriya, even though he's transcendental, like he's a Nityasiddha devotee, but he's acting like a kshatriya, and he has to do his duty as a kshatriya, so he has to enforce the whole system also.
Four types of persons who approach Krishna, stress, wealth, curiosity, knowledge. And the sages in Namaskar are given, use an example of those approaching Krishna. Curiosity.
Yeah.
So it sort of indicates that they're not so advanced in one sense.
Yeah, the sages.
They're simply curious.
Yeah.
But I mentioned the purport that due to the high association of the rishis of Namaskar, the disqualification of Sukadeva, Sutta Goswami's birth was washed off. So that would sort of indicate that Sutta Goswami was even lower in one sense in the sage of Namaskar, because he was elevated by their association. So
Well,
it's hard to understand the situation.
Yeah. Well, it's not that all of the sages were the greatest sages. So some were jigasu, so it appears that some were more just, they weren't real devotees. So they were just inquiring, you please tell us about the Lord, because they didn't know anything about it. So some were maybe gyanis or yogis or whatever, all sorts of persons, or maybe even karma yogas or whatever. So they weren't the greatest devotees. But we also find that there were others who were very advanced among them. So maybe those are the great rishis that he associated with. And so he got of course he also got the knowledge of Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami, who was beyond any of the sages. So some of them were advanced and some were less advanced probably. So those less advanced ones, because of that, the majority, we call them jigasus, who are inquisitive but not fully knowledgeable.
Yeah, it would seem that his main qualification was really hearing Bhagavatam from Sukadeva.
Yeah. So that purified him, obviously. And he couldn't speak unless Sukadeva approved him. So obviously, Sukadeva understood that he did have a grasp of the topic and he had devotion, therefore he was qualified to speak. Otherwise, he wouldn't allow him to do that. Or he wouldn't even taught him. He wouldn't teach him unless he knew he were a qualified person.
You're mentioning how the Brahmanas
Well, both there, but now we emphasize more the qualities and the activities and education, etc. The end product when they're an adult.
It would seem that Vaishnavas fall under a different category because there's no loss in any devotional service. But how do we protect the children and guide them in the proper way? Because I remember there was one devotee, second generation devotee, for her spiritual masters, Vyasa Puja and Bhanu Swami. So Madhurani said that she was addressing her god brothers and god sisters. And she was saying at one point, even though we are born in the movement, we have to decide whether we're going to join the movement. So how do we protect the children and give them the right training that it's not you're not entitled to the privileges of devotion? Like you have to also do follow the process and do the austerities.
Yeah. Well, we do have that also. Just as we can be born in a Brahmin family, then you have to have the qualification to actually act as a Brahmana. So you can be born in a devotee family also and say, I'm a devotee. But if you don't have the qualification of a devotee, then you're not going to ultimately get the respect of others by that. So, we're not interested in name, and just because you're born in that family, therefore I have a right to do this or that, whatever. As with the Brahmana also, so with the devotees. So in the case of devotees, of course, it's more flexible because we never emphasize simply family lines. When we do emphasize family lines too much, then we get into this syndrome of the caste Goswamis. Because they're born in that particular family coming down, therefore they're elevated acharyas. So that you would think like that, they claim like that. But that's a birth line again. So we want to get rid of that type of thing, that because you're born in that family, therefore you're elevated and whatever like that. So as Vaishnavas, we understand that it's not the birth at all, it's actually your qualification. So as Rupa Goswami says there, that we have to be discriminative and see that at the level of the Vaishnava. He may be not a Vaishnava, he may be an offender, he may have some Vaishnava qualities, not too much, and then we can mentally respect him. And if we see he's actually following seriously, then we give him more respect. So we have to judge based upon the guna and the karma, the activities of that person. And based on that, then we give honor to that person. We can, just like in the Varna ashram system, even if the Brahman's not a good Brahman or he's not so qualified, we give respect. The caste anyway, as Krishna and others do also, they give respect. But so we can also respect a person if he's born in a Vaishnava family, but that's more like a mental respect. And then if they're seriously practicing, then of course we give them respect as a real Vaishnava. So we distinguish between, being born in the Vaishnava family and actually practicing Vaishnava is a little different. We'll see that sometimes people we don't even know, they talk to them India or even here where you talk to the Indians and some of them, and what's your name? Oh, Goswami. So they're actually born in some great Brahminical family, probably a Vaishnava Brahminical family somewhere, but they don't know anything about what's the whole history at all. But they're born in that family, but as a result of materialism, they've forgotten everything. Okay, Hare Krishna.